I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up, then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back. We're super excited. We're going to be talking to Jordan Pedron, who is a growth strategist helping early stage startups and small businesses scale their operations. He's scaling these operations efficiently and affordably. As a founder of a growth services firm, he leads a team of former executive, lead gen specialists, and sales experts to deliver results without the need for costly full-time hires. Jordan has a proven track record of scaling startups and successful exits, and he's offering a hands-on, cost-effective approach to sales leadership. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Gabe, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Super happy. I mean, we're in the very similar space, so this is going to be a really fun conversation. And I love talking to people who are fully aligned, with what's going on in the go-to-market world these days. My first question, as always, is I need to hear an origin story, because there's not college courses, when you're looking at college, say, oh yeah, I want to get into sales. Like, how do we get into this thing? I'm not really sure how, and everyone's has a different story. So I need to hear yours, right? What's your origin story? How did Jordan become Jordan, the go-to-market leader?
Yeah, I Gabe, I look back sometimes and I wonder how I got here as well. No, I'll give you a little background. So I was coming out of I got my master's in economics. So this is going to sound like I was actually getting my PhD in economics. It's right after the GFC, and I was living at home, and I decided, hey, I'm tired of, living at home with my parents. Let me go make some money. And so ended up getting hired by this firm. My dad had been finance his whole life. He said, do anything but finance. Ended up getting into finance with Wall Street. And so they're telling me, they're whining and dining me, and they're telling me, hey, this is great. And I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on there, but it sounds nice, investment management. And so I ended up working for this large firm. Everybody would know the name. And I get in and I realize pretty quickly, it's just sales. Everything is sales. And I'm like, well, I can't really manage portfolios if I'm not selling. And so I got up there and I realized, hey, this is sink or swim. Like, there is no, I moved away, I've got to pay my rent. And so I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to get really good at it. And then I'll figure out what I'm going to do later in life. And so that went on for a few years, and, I was really blessed and was successful there. And as my career kind of kept going, I kept looking for ways to jump to what thought I was going to go do. Right. And so in 2017, I was finishing up an MBA because I thought that would help me. And this company reached out, and it was a startup in the fintech space. And so that was a really cool experience. And I said, sure, let me help get an office set up in Atlanta, Georgia. And that was really my pivot to where I'm at now. And what I realized was, when I thought I was in the investment world, I had a mentor, and I'll give him a shout out, Jeff Davis. He's the best guy out there. He's phenomenal. But I decided I'm going to learn. He was our VP of sales at the time. I want to really learn. If I'm going to build this office, I want to learn what is good, what works, and what doesn't work. And so this was a highly funded startup at the time. And so this is a long way of saying, once I saw what he was doing and the way that he was impacting those beneath him, I said, I want to learn everything I can from him. So fast forward 3 years later, we had $1 billion exit. Really cool story there. And that just kind of set the wheels in motion, Gabe, to where I'm at now. So other companies started reaching out, hey, can you come help me, with this, start this company and so on. And we'll probably get in that story. But the origin, Gabe, to put it in a nutshell, is I went in one direction and it just kept rolling. And, here I am. So, it's still being written, but I certainly did not plan it this way, but thankful for it.
I love that. I love that.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that as well. That's a great story and so cool that you get to help those early stage businesses really grow. So, what do you think sets apart your strategy from traditional sales consultings for startups?
Yeah, it really, Lexi, started as really an outflow of kind of the origin stories. That was a great segue, Gabe. So, as I began working with those companies, I was, we had that big exit with Personal Capitals. That was the firm I was with. Went to a smaller company, and we had a really cool story, and perhaps we'll get into that as well. And so, in a pretty short period of time, that kind of took off, and was able to spin off one side of that business. And then smaller companies started reaching out to me. And so I said, well, I'm leaving this now. I don't know what my next step is yet, but yeah, I would love to help you. And then another company, hey, I would love to help you as well. So what I realized is I really came to love helping the startups. I was actually involved in the ATL Tech Village to some degree when I was living in Atlanta. So I'm outside of Dallas now. And just working with, not really for pay or anything, but having some friends who are doing cool things. And I just love that environment. And so, my thought was, hey, if I can actually take what I learned from other mentors, as I mentioned, and cool stories with some other startups that were able to go to exits, and oh my gosh, I actually was able to implement something that worked well. What if I could do this for smaller companies that need that help and no one's really reaching out? They don't have the budget. So in short, that's really what got me here now. And as I often say, hey, look, I can help you get unstuck if you can get to where you need to go, and you don't have to hire me forever, but I would love to help you figure out this problem. And if there's anything I can do there, I'd love to help. And I'll just add a bit of color to it. I was talking to this other prospect the other day, and I said, look, for whatever reason, this is the path, kind of gave to what we're talking about that I'm on now. And I have developed skills over the last, 15 plus years. I would love to say I'm a really skilled, carpenter. Like my grandfather was a woodworker. My desk I built, but I'm not great at that. I would love to say I could do some other things, but these are the skills that I have. So I want to take what I have, and if I can help people with it, all the better.
So bootstrapping is really, upwards right now. There's a big trend in bootstrapping. And of course, in 2025, a lot of companies aren't seeing the funding they used to 2-3 years ago. So bootstrapping is definitely more popular. Living in that startup mode and working with bootstrap founders, how are you able to drive quick success in the sales strategy, right? Because they need it, right? They need money now. And, they're not getting a ton of funding, of course, because of the bootstrap. So therefore, they need to and realize success, kind of like a sink and swim mentality. So how do you come in, and do you work with bootstrap businesses differently than you would work with someone who has a little bit more funding or a lot of funding? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And Gabe, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, SVB and everything that happened in 2023, like we're still seeing the reverberations of that. So that's something that has impacted me a lot. And when I first started, it was fintech startups saying, "Hey, can you come help me out?" And then all of a sudden, they thought they had the funding. Oh, we don't have that funding anymore. And perhaps we'll get a little bit more into how just in the last 8 months we've evolved. And Gabe, if we do this podcast 3 or 6 months from now, it's probably going to sound different, right? But
Right.
to your question, so I have a prospect right now. We've been in contact for a month and a half or so, and we had connected actually on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, would love to. I need to get started. Can we talk?" And I'm like, yeah, let's chat. And they have a really cool business model. The problem is he thought he would have funding by the end of the year. They still aren't there yet. And so we chatted the other day. We actually have a meeting tomorrow. And I said, look, here's what we've done with some companies. I love what you're doing. Personally, I would enjoy helping you and working with you. You don't have the full, funding right now to really implement everything we do for people. However, let's do a tiered basis. So let's talk about a tier one development. If you need to just get out the ground running right now, you need to show investors, hey, we're starting to get some sales, we're starting to bring some things in. We'll start at a pretty deep discount. Now we're not bringing everything up the hours. I'm not building your holistic strategy, and we're not building playbooks and things like that. But let's get off the ground running. And so for him, for example, he's saying, look, I'm a product guy. I've got a bunch of engineers. I've been trying to be a founder-led sales for a while. We're bringing some revenue, but I'm not that good at it. I need some help. And so I'm coming in on a tiered approach saying, let's work with what you got. Once we get more momentum here and this helps out your funding, then let's go from there. And there's some that are fully bootstrapped. And so it's a case by case basis. Sometimes we'll have to say, man, we would love to work with you, but it's just for what we're going to do and the people we're going to bring on, we can't do this. But most of the time we're able to work out something. If personally it comes down to, do you like the people? Do you want to work with them? Do you want to help them? And do they have something you believe in? And if so, like, I'm more than happy to say, look, we'll cut a few months to get the relationship going, and then we'll be in a really good spot.
Yeah, I got to follow up here. And I know if Lexi has a ton of questions for you too, but I'm always upstaging here. But you mentioned something about a product guy, a founder that's a product guy. And we come across that a lot. And I know a lot of our audience members are in that boat, right? They're founders and they think they're just not good at sales because they're product people. My position is, no matter if you're a product or a sales guy, if you're the founder, you're the best salesperson, right?
Absolutely.
What's your position and how do you enable that product person, that product guy founder to, roll up their sleeves and say, you know what? Maybe you're not a sales guru, but you can speak authentically about your product more than anyone, even though you think in zeros and ones sometimes, right? How do you take that personality type and work with them to bring it to market?
Yeah. So the approach that you're talking about is a conversation I've had multiple times. And it's one that I also have. It's one of the first things I do when I go to work with a company, whether I was a W-2 or with my company now, for the frontline salespeople. And so I did this, help lead this event in Orlando for this company this past week. And at the end of, the room's filled and it's their big GKO. And the host of it asked me, okay, what's one? So we did a 90-minute session. We did all these trainings and there's like tactical. We're going through data. Here's what's working. Here's what's not working. Here's sales tactics, all of this stuff. He said, what's one takeaway you would tell the room right now? So sales leaders and frontline AEs, AMs, and SDRs. And I said, look, we covered a lot of data. And this is a long way to get to your question, Gabe, but look, we covered a lot of data. We covered a lot of tactics. All of these things are tools to get you to where you need to go. But ultimately, if I were to only give one piece of advice, understand that you are an authority in your space, right? So a lot of times you're going to, Mr., Mrs. Founder, you're going to a CEO, you're going to a boardroom, you're going to a VC firm, right? Or you're going to a big prospect. And you may think, hey, why would they want to invest in me? Or you're having your own doubts. The reality is, your product better than anybody else, to your point, Gabe. Go in with that confidence. It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you. And so when you have that mindset, it really permeates everything you do. It permeates when you're on the phone. It permeates when you're in a virtual meeting, you're in person, and people can pick up on that. And so that's the number one thing. So to your question, hey, I'm iffy. I spoke with a guy the other day and he's like, hey, like, I'm a product guy, and same with the meeting tomorrow. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Well, there's two parts to it. Is, first of all, yes, you can. And the reality is, don't doubt yourself. Understand that if you really believe in what you're doing, and if you have the right ICP, right? Like, you've identified your client base and there's a good product market fit here. We got to figure that out. But as long as that's the case, understand. And if you go into your conversation that, hey, Mr. Mrs. Prospect or Mr. Mrs. Investor, you need me 10 times more than I need you. I'm going to talk to 10 other people this week. But if you don't talk to me, if you don't let me help you, that problem that you're staying up late at night, it's going to continue to be there. So if you go with that mindset, I think that's the biggest thing. And so I've seen founders be like, oh, you know what? You're right. You don't have to have a mantra like, I know these crazy sales tactics. At the end of the day, it's psychology and it's just working with people.
Yeah, that's right on it. How do you ensure that the sales process remains flexible enough to evolve while your company's going through changes, growing, but also staying to what is the best strategy and tactics? How do you handle that?
Yeah. So, that's, That's a difficult one. So you want to make sure that you're staying flexible. But what I would simply say is, you need to be really like super dialed in, um, so that the process, right? And so these are call reviews, these are data analysis, because what you want to make sure that you're doing is what is working and what's not working. Um, and so if you've built out company playbooks and you built systems and process, which is very important early on, right? But if you've built these things, um, and where it's going to take the company to the next steps. If you're just letting it ride, the reality is, without a doubt, especially earlier stage companies, there's going to be gaps in that are not yet filled, and there's going to be parts of that that need to be adjusted. And so you want to make sure if it's an early stage startup. So there was one that I was with, I alluded to earlier, where I was the VP of sales, but I was also, running meetings and training the other AEs and, everything from top to bottom. And so I was hands-on going through calls and we built a script, for some of them. And then realized, hey, this isn't working anymore. And the reason I knew that is because we were doing gong calls, right? Not to give a shout out or anything, but and so what's working with that company? And then what you want to do is have that process in place where it's a framework, but you're not dogmatic about it, right? And then you're able to communicate to leadership and say, look, after I'm gone 12 months, 6 months, whatever that relationship, once they get to the level they need to get at, saying, here's what I identify and how I know when to adjust. And here's what you need to do to adjust going forward so that it's, flexible with the need of the client, the prospect, whatever the market's telling you. So yeah, in summary, you just want to build that framework out. But then know what you're looking for. Like, what are the signs to adjust? And know what move you need to make, when you see those signs, if that makes sense.
It does. And you said a few things there that I want to kind of drill down into because startup land, right? You wear a lot of hats, like you were just mentioning. You're doing this, you're doing that. You're doing 15 things. Everyone's doing that. That's how you live in startup world. But you're also putting processes and procedures in place. So it's almost counterintuitive, right? Because you're doing so many things, but you want to put in processes for scalability. Here's my question. How long do you allow something to go on for where you're flexible enough to pivot and tweak things to make sure that process is the right process, but give it enough time? And I digress. So here in our world, like I always say, it takes us 3 months to boil water. Yeah. Right. In the prospecting function, I need a full quarter of your time to go ahead and start a prospecting function with the multi-touches it's required to see true benchmark numbers. So I always look at things in a 90-day increments before we truly pivot. Now we're tweaking along the way. We're teetering and we're tweaking and we're tightening things up and we're pulling things back. We're not, at least, we're always looking at it, we're always monitoring and pulling levers. But we have that patience of it takes us 3 months again to make sure that we can get to a raging boil to determine if we should make a new stove or not, right? So that's my analogy. So how do you judge that in regards to timing and flexibility when you're putting these processes in place, especially when you're juggling and spinning 10 plates at once in a startup world?
Yeah, it really is tough. Yeah. So if I were to give you a quick short answer, Gabe, you got inside my head and it's usually by quarter. So that's what I typically look at, but it's also going to depend. I mean, there's some companies where there's a 9 to 12 month sales cycle. And so you got to be really careful. You might only be through the first few stages of it. And the reality is most of my clients, who, or prospects at least reaching out to me, it's usually a B2B model and it's a longer sales cycle, and that's fine. But those that I feel like I've been able to have the most experience with my W-2 space is more B2C. So it's going to depend on what that sales cycle looks like. But let's say it's a typical B2C or it's a quicker B2B model. You definitely want to give it a quarter. And really what I'm looking for in that is not so much, and this goes back to maybe a point we'll get to, when you're building the sales strategy. So my personal process when I've gone in is you want to build the strategy first, just to be very high level and generic. Like, here's exactly what we're looking at. Here's all the different pieces that we need to have in place. Now let's narrow it down here, and we're going to narrow it down. And then we're not starting from here's what the call script looks like and let's figure it out. And that might sound obvious, but what I'm looking at first is when I build that, then the number one thing for me is I'm getting buy-in from leadership. right? Hey, do you agree? Is this going to work? Does this sound like the right plan? And if I buy in and I have a good relationship, um, then it's like, hey, we have a quarter to figure this out. So from that point on, I'm looking at the data, I'm seeing what's working, what's not working. And look, I'm 38, Gabe. I'm sure when I'm 48, I'll maybe have a better, wiser answer. But what I'm looking at this point is now I'm working with the sales reps and I'm looking at the frontline sales managers, depending on the size of the company. And now I'm hearing I want to tweak their process because what I want to do is make sure that I'm giving everything I can and we're giving everything we can to this process. And then if that doesn't work, okay, let's take a step back. So I guess in summary, it's not so much of a hard, like it's always 90 days, although that typically is what I'm looking at, or it's always, 2 quarters or whatever. It's more of what is the sales cycle process that we're expecting? Let's give everything we can. Let's give it our best shot. And then if that doesn't work, okay, let's take a step back and assess, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So sales team training seems like a cornerstone of your approach. What are the most common challenges you see with startup sales teams and how do you address them in your training?
Yeah. So for me personally, from a sales standpoint, that's the thing that I get the most excited about. So if I was to be able to have, the same clients and the same experiences and they wanted me just to do sales training and coaching, like I would love that. And I love working with people. I love seeing that. But for me, it's really um I think what I see the most, if I were to pick one thing, is that, especially in the startup world, and also want to be clear, I'm not working with just startups. A lot of times these are smaller companies. They may have been around for 15 years, but they've kind of plateaued and they haven't really had the investment or sales. But so whether they're a more established, smaller company, or they are a startup, usually if they have sales reps, it's one of two things. It's either if it's more established company, they've been at that company for 15 or so years, and that's the only company they've been at, and that's the only process they've ever known. And if it is a startup, a lot of the times you're getting sales reps, whether it's SDRs, which, we're looking to get high quality SDRs, or you're trying to bring on AEs or frontline managers, whatever the case is, they're usually coming from not just different companies, but different industries. And they're having different sales tactics, techniques. They've been mentored differently. And so when you come in, what I'm looking at is, I want to be super intentional and focus not just on building, the training that's customized, for the tactics for this company, for these individuals. But the important part, and I've had to learn this the hard way, by the way, is you got to explain the why behind it. Like, why are we doing it this way? Because especially if you're hired and you've done a really good job, whether you've been in that company a long time or you've had success somewhere else, and now you're wanting to come in with a startup and, you're really highly esteemed. Look, we all have ego, hopefully I can keep mine in check and hopefully we can all have, a little bit of humility there. But the reality is we all have ego. So the key point there is, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's the process, but let me explain why we're doing it this way. And then I want to get buy-in from the reps, right? I want to get buy-in from the frontline managers. We're going to have a meeting. What do you think? Do you think this is a good way of going about it? Sometimes I'll have some individuals, they'll be part of the decision makers. The top performing AEs, sometimes I'm bringing them in those meetings and they're not going to necessarily move the needle or change necessarily, but I want them to understand that, hey, your input is valuable and I want you to, be part of the conversation. So once they understand the why behind it, and the input and all of that, they can really take ownership and run with it. And then that's really helpful for adoption as well. So it's like, hey, this is what we're doing. Do you agree? Is this a good place to get where we're going? Yeah, man, I love that. Let's run with this. And so that's kind of the way, I've approached it to this point.
Absolutely. So I want to switch gears here and really talk about some trends that are happening in sales. And I know I have a question and Lexi has one too. And I usually like to take this one because, I spoke at the AI summit last year and I'm going to be speaking at it again this year. And, AI I think is the biggest buzzword of 2024. And it's continuing on in 2025, especially in the sales space. So, as sales technology evolves and it's continually evolves, how do you see it? And what's your prediction, right? Where do you see AI living in the sales, whether it's the AE, SDR function, and how are you working with it to optimize your clients to make sure that they're doing all the things that are available to us or each and every single day to optimize their success.
Yeah, I mean, AI is the buzzword, and it's going to be the buzzword for some time. Gabe, there's so many ways we can go with this, but I'm just going to speak to what I'm doing right now and what I've seen. So at a recent event, a client event I was at, as part of a workshop that had to do with, AI implementation with sales. So how AI helps enable sales. And I'm going to give a lot of credit here. I'm going to give a little shout out to Jake Dunlap at Scaled, because he has a book out, and
Jake's awesome. Yeah.
yeah. So I really have learned a lot from him in this space, and got a lot of this. But what really we're looking at is, let's use ChatGPT or maybe Perplexity or something, whatever the case may be. If you use the paid ChatGPT, that's great. And I'll try to get the AEs to do that. But just enabling the AE. So we're talking like role play. Like, who do tell the ChatGPT who they are, right? And just being able to now, I mean, even where we are from 6, 8 months ago, being able to say, okay, I want you to do this, this, and that. So if you're not getting the sales training you need as an AE, AM, sales rep, whatever your role is, hey, you don't have an excuse. You have the ability right now. And I tell you, Gabe, it is phenomenal how precise that can be. And so you can do a full role play process with that. I would also say speeding up the on-ramping for new reps. So instead of taking 6 weeks to learn your ICP, your industry, what is the call script, all of this, you can go through, 2 days worth of create your own trainings and processes. Now, I'm hoping that leadership can adopt this, and it's just going to ramp you up much quicker. And then the third thing is just saving just wild amounts of time in research and prep. So a recent client, they're a large company, really large company. They have really long sales cycles. There is no standardized way for these AEs and AMs to prep for their meetings. And when I asked around the room, hey, how much time do you typically spend prepping? And it's like an hour. But the other pain point there is most of them don't ever feel prepared enough going into that. So they're spending an hour of time per call minimum, and yet they end up finding more on that initial call. And if they don't have all the answers, which is another thing maybe we'll get to a side topic, but who's the buyer in 2025? They're more prepared than ever. They have more information coming to that first meeting than ever. And if you're not able to, meet them there, they're like, you may not be the person I need to talk to. So,
Right.
So anyways, so thirdly is just, you can do a quick ChatGPT on research, and you have more information if you know how to ask the right questions, and if you're enabling yourself appropriately to do the right prep for those meetings. So yeah, that's it. I'll say role play and just enablement, speeding up, and research.
So here's my follow-up, because I get demoed all the time. I get cold called all the time. And, every demo I'm going into, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's this, Zoom world that we live in, but I just feel like the AEs of today are ill prepared on these demos, or undertrained on these demos than ever before. Yet there's more tools, technology, and AI researching opportunities than ever before. So what gives? Why do I feel like 5 years ago I was in a demo and everyone knew everything, including my social security number, before I even said hello? And now with no tools, and now tools are at our fingertips, yet AEs are walking in, telling me they got only 20 minutes to talk to me, and they're trying to sell me the deal. Do you see that, or is it just me?
I do see that. Man, I see that, and I'm going to give you my hypothesis because I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
No, so my hypothesis is this, and this is actually, I spoke to a room full of AEs as well, and so when they were giving me their feedback, I was like, I think I'm onto something, because I've only been working with a couple companies where I identified that. But my hypothesis is, because the ability, to my point that I was just talking about in the research and the information, it's all at your fingertips, and you can be very lazy with ChatGPT and still get a lot of information. They're coming and they're basically either literally or figuratively copy and pasting, right? Here's what I need to know. And now I'm putting my brain on basically in the back seat.
Right.
And what you should be doing is you're using AI to enhance everything that you already are. Now that I have everything I need, we're going to turn our brains on in hyper overdrive. And the final thing I would say is, look, no matter how advanced AI gets, and it's going to, actually, speaking of Jake, he recently said, look, this is the most rudimentary level AI is ever going to be. From here forward, we're going to look back and say, oh, we used to, we were at that level. But as it continues to evolve, this should enable you and this should make you, not only be better, but sales is always going to be, as far as I'm concerned, is always going to be a human interaction, right? And so it's psychology. If you can't connect with a person, if you don't spend time to understanding who they are, and if you don't know their journey, man, you're using all of these tools and all of this data to make you more lazy and make you a worse seller. So you've got to step up your personal game and just use that to enable yourself, not to replace yourself.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think,
That's my hypothesis. So
yeah, I agree. And I think it just comes with people with a lot of short content and things being so easy. It's such a fast pace of life that you're not taking that time. So looking ahead, what do you believe will be the biggest challenge for sales leaders in the next few years?
yeah, as we looking at the last few years, and I was talking to some leaders, um, recently about this, like, what does that look like? My caveat is a lot's going to depend on the economic environment. Gabe, we were talking about, 2023 and all of that. So, we're going to see more bootstrapping, and we're going to see more funding because that changes the whole environment. But like, let's say all else constant, like, back in my academic days, the in economics to nerd out there, but all else constant. I think understanding that sales is not what it was 5 years ago, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. It's certainly not what it was 10 years ago. And the number one thing is, buyers, just as I mentioned, they're more prepared, I think, than ever before. And I read a recent study, and off the top of my head, it might have been Deloitte, but I could be wrong there. I'll have to go find the citation. But I read a study recently. It's something like 80% of, give or take, 80% of buyers are coming into meetings already doing some level of research prior to, right? So I think that, sellers and sales leaders really have to understand that and then adjust each stage of their pipeline, being more informed. So understanding where their buyer is today, what the buyer's expecting from them. And to your point, Gabe, just a moment ago, or maybe the point that you kind of led me on is, look, you can't cut the personality out, the person out. So don't diminish that, but just come prepared and be super understanding that this person isn't coming in, blinders and everything you tell them is gospel. Like maybe, when I started back in 2010 or whatever, but, they're coming in now with some level of knowledge and understanding. If you don't meet their expectations, you're not super dialed in, like they're a more picky buyer today. So I think, at least that's what I'm observing, and I'm having to try to help our team.
Absolutely. Well, we could talk shop all day long. I mean, this is our world. So this has been a great conversation. How do people, well, actually, before I ask you how, like, who are those individuals, right? Who do you want to talk to? Who do you want to get impact from you? Like, who's the individual? Who's your ICP from our audience members? Say, you know what? I should probably reach out to Jordan. This is something I need to talk to him more about. Who's that individual?
If you have a business or you're a leader at a business, and again, it doesn't have to be a startup, technically by definition, but it's either usually if you're a startup, you're a smaller size company, you're under 30 million annual revenue. It's typically is companies I work with. Now, I worked with much, much larger, but ideally, if you're in that space and you're saying, look, I don't know exactly what my need is, but I know that I need to increase revenue. We've been at, 15 million ARR roughly the last 3 years. We're doing fine, but how do we get to that next level? Then let's talk. And so what I would say, and this is how I go into all my conversations, and most of all my clients are actually referred to me. And if they're referred to me, it's like, hey, I want to help you. And if I can't, I'm going to refer you to someone else who can help you. But either way, let's dive into it. And we're going to go through a full free analysis. And I genuinely mean that, like there's no hook. And let me see, identify there's some areas that we can see to help. And if you want us to help you along that journey, great. And if not, hey, this conversation was helpful. So yeah, if you have a business and you just feel a little stuck, as I always say, let me help you get unstuck. We have a team. Just a little background on us is I started out, Gabe, as I mentioned earlier, with just myself. And it just started with, hey, other companies wanted me to help out and let me help you. And I want to work with multiple clients. A lot of my clients, and so the ICP that you just mentioned, would say, Jordan, we would absolutely love to work with you. In fact, I reached out because I need help. However, we also need help with marketing. We also need help with lead generation. We also need help with, fill in the blanks. So we don't really have the budget for this right now. We got to fill out those other ones later. So I have on my team former CMO at a company I worked with and some other former executives or really good in lead generation and even an AI specialist that saying, hey, we're going to come in and whatever you need help with, I'm going to bring my team along and we're going to do it at really a fraction of what larger size companies may spend on a consultant. So the short of it is, if you have that need, let us talk and maybe we can help you. And if so, then we can continue the conversation from there.
Love that. And we know, I mean, you know your stuff, obviously, and your team's amazing. We've collaborated with you before, so we're really proud to endorse you as well. How do people get a hold of you? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way? What's your website? You want to plug something?
LinkedIn. It's just my name, Jordan Pedron. You can email me directly. It's Jordan. At least my email as of right now is Jordan at Pedron GRP. So that's PEDRON grp.com. But yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. If you can't, use my email and love to chat with you.
Awesome. There it is, team. Thank you so much, Lexi. Thank you so much, Jordan. We appreciate working with you, and thanks so much for the conversation.
Gabe, Lexi, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.